presentation of Dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore and Bettis family legacy of building the great state of Idaho. By the Friends of Idaho Public Television and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
I mean, at some point you think the people who are racist will just get tired of it. I mean, we who are black can't get tired of being ourselves. We just are. We're black. We don't know what to do about it.
Coming up, a discussion with author Jamaica Kincaid about race, about anger, about literature, and about gardening. That's Dialogue next. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Marcia Franklin. My guest today has had a life that one writer called a fairy tale. She, however, might beg to differ. Jamaica Kincaid, whose given name was Elaine Potter Richardson, was born into poverty on the Caribbean island of Antigua. As a teen, her mother sent her to New York to be a nanny. An avid reader and writer, Kincaid overcame obstacles to become a columnist and writer for The New Yorker, where she spent 20 years. A collection of more than 70 of her pieces for the magazine, called Talk Stories, was published in 2001. Her other nonfiction work includes the books A Small Place, My Brother, and My Garden Book. Kincaid is also the author of 5 novels, which include Annie John, Lucy, and The Autobiography of My Mother. Known for her often biting commentary on society and her own family, she, as you will hear, pushes back against that description. I had a far-ranging discussion with Kincaid at the 2016 Sun Valley Writers Conference, a conversation that touched on her life, race relations in America, Brexit, and gardening. Well, first of all, I want to welcome you to Idaho. I was reading one of your books. It's called My Garden Book, and I noted that Idaho features in it in a charming way. You used to, I don't know if you still do, but you got Roniger Seed Company.
Roniger, yes,
Seed
Mr.
Company
Roniger.
Catalog from Moyie
Yes.
Springs.
Yes. Are they still in
They
business?
are still, I looked them up.
Oh.
They're still producing a seed catalog.
Yes.
That was a delight for you to
Oh,
get that.
it was wonderful. His catalog was the best written. I used to look forward to it. You know, it just came in this little newsprint, and he was so interested in his potatoes. He loved various kinds, introduced new kinds, found old ones. It was a pleasure to read. You'd get it in January, you know, when it was really cold. I used to like to sit in the hot tub of water, and read it while I drank ginger ale and ate oranges. It was just delightful.
You just came back from a hike yourself, looking at flowers here.
Yes.
This is an important part of your life, the gardening and the flowers.
Yes. The flowers, I mean, usually, you know, you're a gardener and you buy plants somewhere, but I love to see some of the plants I'm growing in the place they actually come from. So not everything I see I'm growing, but a lot of times I've gone to China, I've gone to Nepal to look for seeds that I would become plants in my garden. I do like to do that, and you know, it has this other advantage of hiking and seeing the surface of the earth in all its vagaries and different formations. You know, it's just so you're sort of looking at your garden, and then you're looking at the wider garden of the earth, and you know, thinking about the creation story. The creation story.
Well, you have a wonderful quote that I've read, and I'll read out loud here that relates to that. You say, "I shall never have the garden I have in my mind, but that for me is the joy of it. Certain things can never be realized, and so all the more reason to attempt them. A garden, no matter how good it is, must never completely satisfy. The world as we know it, after all, began in a very good garden, a completely satisfying garden, paradise. But after a while, the owner and the occupants wanted more."
That's that's the story of Adam and Eve and God. They were the gardeners, and he owned the garden, and they had a disagreement, and he fired them.
So we're always looking for more, aren't we? And a lot of your
Yes,
stories
yes.
are about that. And in fact, in researching you, I find that your life has often been about that, wanting more, needing to see the wider world.
Yes, I think
To,
that's true.
everybody's idea of paradise is different.
Yes.
But you had this sense of wanting to see something past Antigua,
Yes.
where you grew up.
That's true. That is very true. I'm a little stunned that you read me so easily, so quickly. But yes, it's not wanting more in terms of greed, wanting
No,
more,
yes.
but I always want to see more around the corner. I was hiking down in that national park called Big Bend, and the hike goes around a bend, the canyon cuts around the bend, and I just kept wanting to see more and more of it until my companions had to say, come back, we have to go.
So when you thought about, as a child, the wider world, reading was one of the things that brought that to you. I mean, you've always been
Yes.
interested in both reading and writing from a very young age.
That is true. I learned to read when, certainly by the time I was 3.5, I could read just about anything you put in front of me. And I didn't have enough things to read. So my mother sent me to school when I was 3.5, but you could only go to school when you were 5. And she told me to say, if they asked me, that I'm 5. And I would consider that the beginning of my fiction writing, saying I'm one thing when I'm not. But it is true that I read obsessively everything, and most of the things I had to read came from far away or described something far away. So I always wanted things from far away. For instance, I was just remembering this. I came in contact with knowledge of death, the huge psychological disruption death is, especially for a child. And I remember saying to my mother, why don't we go someplace else, someplace far away, because it's clear that people don't die in the other places. And she looked at me with the greatest pity and said, they die, but you just don't hear of it. And that was just so stunning, the things I didn't hear of. And so I suppose all of those things created longing in me for going.
It was so interesting to me that you said you had misbehaved in school, and as a punishment, you had to read Jane Eyre.
Yes.
But that it was transformative for you.
Yes.
Because by reading the story, you learned that you don't have to live out a certain prescribed
That's
life.
absolutely true.
You can.
It's absolutely true. In reading that, but it's an interesting thing. In reading the book, I didn't long to be Jane Eyre. I longed to be Charlotte Bronte, and used to, for a long time, I think maybe it lasted way into my adolescence, I would pretend I was Charlotte Bronte. And I was always writing, but nothing really. I wrote imaginative. I pretended I was writing. So I would write in a book that already had writing in it.
Fast forwarding, you came to the United States as an au pair, if you want to describe it that way, a nanny, a servant.
A servant, I like to say, so it doesn't sound too fancy.
When you were 16. And, I've heard the rest of the trajectory described as somewhat of a fairy tale life that you ended up writing for the New Yorker. I'm sure you might choose a different verbiage than fairy tale for that, but it was
indeed.
There were some very lucky moments as well.
That is true.
That led you to be able to write for the New Yorker.
That is true. The story seems magical. It certainly is improbable, A person I owe one of those magical moments, improbable moments for. I boldly went. I applied for a job at a magazine called Mademoiselle, which is out of business now. And I like to think it's because of, they're out of business because of the wrong they did me when I was a young person. I didn't get a job there because, as someone later told me, don't you know they don't employ black girls. But then I went to this magazine called Ingenue, and I said to them, oh, I'd like to interview Gloria Steinem about what she was like when she was the age of the girls who read the magazine. And they said, give it a try. So I called up Ms. Magazine and said, I'd like to speak to Gloria Steinem. And sure enough, she got on the phone and gave me an interview. And it was such a success that the magazine turned it into a series of interviews called When I Was 17. So I interviewed Yoko Ono, Jim Brown, all these people, Pam Grier. I wonder where those interviews are, where those magazines are. Anyway, from that, I met a man named George W.S. Trow, and he was a writer for the New Yorker, and he would take me to all these events. And one day, I said something, and he thought it was so funny, and he said, would you like to meet Mr. Shawn? And I had no idea who Mr. Shawn was, but I said yes, and I met Mr. Shawn, and Mr. Shawn said, maybe I could write for the magazine. I wrote something, and he published it just the way I wrote it. Now, in between those seemingly magical events were just tears and tears and hunger and the landlord ringing me up in the middle of the night because I hadn't paid the rent. And I may have even at one point gotten an eviction notice, sleeping on people's couches, just all sorts of loneliness. I had no family, I had no money, I had poor friends who were just as poor as I was. But the one thing I would say that I had is that I was sort of fearless. I didn't know how to be afraid. I didn't know how to fail because I didn't know how to succeed. So whatever happened, I just sort of went on and went on and went on. And so that's the improbability.
You changed your name from
I did.
Elaine Potter Richardson, do I have that correct?
I did.
To Jamaica Kincaid, not Antigua Kincaid.
No.
Jamaica Kincaid.
It was never going to be Antigua. It might have been Havana. Havana Davenport was a name.
Was a contender?
Yes. George Trow used it in one of his stories later. Havana and Dominica Davenport, he made up two characters. Why Jamaica? I don't really know.
The sound is good.
The sound is good.
Kincaid.
And of course, I had no idea that I would be asked this question. The main reason is I didn't want my parents to know I was writing because I would fail at it. They would laugh at me. I remember writing to them and saying my mother saying that I was in college. I'd gone to college in New Hampshire, a school called Franconia College, and how cold it was and how hard it was. And she wrote me back a blistering condemnation, and I was sort of trying to do that immigrant thing of bettering yourself. And she said, you're always trying to do things you can't do. And I was sure I would fail at being a writer, but I was going to do it anyway, try to become a writer. So I didn't want her to know. I didn't want them to know at my failure, so I changed my name.
You have said that when you were young, you started to write about your own life, and you came to see that act of writing actually saved your life.
Yes, I think that's quite true. Looking at my life and understanding how it is someone like me come to be in the world with the historical events that occur in which I'm part of, how to make sense of that seemed very important to me. How to make sense of the fact that when I was a child I had to memorize a poem about a flower I might never have seen, and learn to admire and love the people who brought me the erasure of my memory of myself. And by myself, not my individual self, but the selves of all the people I come from.
You talk about the British?
The British,
You're
yes.
talking about...
I'm very happy about Brexit. Yes. Little England, it can't be little enough for me. Yes. They can't suffer enough. It's such an irony that people who had gone all over the world and clobbered people over the head and tried to force them to be English didn't like people coming from Eastern Europe and living in England. I think something that most of the world doesn't understand about the English is that they never considered Eastern Europeans white people, or people from Spain, or people from Italy, people from Greece.
So the constriction of Britain, its self-constriction, is of delight to you?
Oh, it's self-destruction, yes. Well, I don't like to see people suffer, but really, the thing called Britishness, oh, it can't go soon enough for me. I absolutely dislike it.
Your writing was challenging for me to read at times, but that's the point, isn't it? I mean, it shouldn't be,
Yes.
however we want to describe it, a piece of cake, or
A piece of cake.
a walk in the park, or something like that.
Well,
It requires attention.
Well, yes. I mean, I suppose I write with a certain amount of influence on me from writing that I read when I came into association with literature. I took it seriously. I didn't just read Dickens. I never just read anything. Any book that is just something I can read, I don't read it at all. I want to see some thinking. And my books, yeah, the ones that are easy to read, Annie John, I think Lucy's easy to read. They're easy to read, but they're full of undercurrents of meaning.
Yes.
Lucy really refers to Lucifer in Paradise Lost. Annie John refers to Mother Country and Colony. They're very layered, but as I moved away from them, from that kind of writing, the last book I wrote, I can see it's very difficult for people to read. But I'm reading The Death of Socrates again, and I'm reading Phaedo, and it's difficult. It's very difficult. Anything worth reading is difficult to read. A book is not. I mean, there's a certain kind of writing you can see the writer has the little post-its on the wall. The plot goes this way and that way, and that's fine. I mean, I can't do it myself, so I won't speak of it in a bad way. But I have no interest at all in doing that. I want to think about. I want to think about writing when I'm writing. The writing I'm doing, I want to really, think about every part of it, and that is my way.
And I've seen you say that most recent book was a spectacular failure in some ways, but that wasn't the point either. The point was to try.
Yeah.
And that you're writing for yourself.
Yeah.
You're not
well,
writing.
It was a spectacular failure. In what I was trying to do. Never mind that almost no one, even the positive reviews, didn't really understand it. And this is, part of the problem of not being a white man. We can now say these things freely. My work is regarded as, it's sloppy. She doesn't do this. She doesn't do that. Now, I'm not saying I'm a genius, but I'm not a sloppy writer. My writing is very precise. But there is a way of judging what I write because I, as a black woman, should write about slavery or the overburdened black woman. And I actually love, I shouldn't say I love, how should I put it? I want there to be more understanding of slavery but I don't wish to write about it in that particular way. I will write about it in a way that is not expected, but it should be regarded with some care and respect and not dismissed.
Well, so much of what intrigues me about your work as well is the duality of hate and love. Now people have pointed to your work and have said, it's too angry.
Has anyone ever called Norman Mailer's work angry, Philip Roth's work angry? You wouldn't call John Updike's work angry because it isn't. But there isn't a man who has written a book that it's too angry. It's something that happens all the time to me. My work is considered angry. It's not angry at all. It's very frank and it's truthful. There isn't a lie in it. There isn't anything you can say that never happened. The world, it's the sort of thing that I could write a sentence that says, the earth is round, and she's very angry, the earth is round.
Well, you did write about hating your mother, and, so that's probably
Who doesn't hate their mother? Everybody hates their mother. Some of us won't say it, but it's not all we feel about our mother. And it's not all I feel about my mother. I've written about the mother. I've written things about. There must be some moment in everybody's day where they just think, about their mother. But I just have the courage to say it. Anger is not a criticism. It's something the work might make you feel, but you can't say that the work is angry. It only makes you feel angry, but you feel that the work is, but the work itself isn't angry. It's something else. There's all sorts of ways to look at a work of art and criticize it or say something about it, but anger just isn't really the word. I mean, I'm sorry, do we look at Starry Night of Van Gogh? He cut off his ear. Cutting off your ear, I mean, that's pretty. What's that about? I mean, is he angry? We don't say Van Gogh was so angry at himself he cut off his ear. We look for what's wrong with him and we are sympathetic. I mean...
So because you're Black, because you're a woman, it's
angry, and so therefore we'll have nothing more to do with it. There's no reason to look at this in any other way. It's angry and it's done, and goodbye.
What did you mean when you said that you feel it's your duty to make everyone a little less happy?
Well, yes. I mean, if you want to make people happy, you can make Hello Kitty, but that's not the. Yeah, I mean, it's all something to make you think. You want to be, it's the little thing in the oyster, the little irritant,
That makes the pearl?
Yes, yes.
What is happening in your view right now in our country? Do you think it's worse? What's going on?
I don't think it's worse, but there's nothing wrong that can't be made right. Just stop being racist. Stop killing Black people. Stop every time you see a Black person thinking they're going to do something. I mean, actually, it's every time you see a white person, you should be afraid because Black people just don't have the tools to do terrible things. They never had the tools to build ovens and throw people in them. They never had the tools to drop a bomb on 2 atom bombs on a country. They're quite innocent in relation to crimes people have committed. They're innocent. They just want to go about their lives and live in a nice house. It seems to me they want to be human beings. That's the really interesting thing to me about all of this, that there isn't the understanding that all a Black person would like to do is to get out of bed in the morning and wonder, who am I today? How do I arrange? To have an existential crisis, the crisis of what is a human being, to reflect on your own individual uniqueness, not to be worried about the stupid color of your skin, which is something you couldn't help. You know, you can't really help it. Really, I think if we were to just look at all black people as just sort of the most innocent people in the entire country, if not the face of the earth, they never did anything. They didn't enslave themselves and put themselves on ships and drag themselves individually across the ocean and work themselves, force themselves, beat themselves to shreds, to make cotton, to make sugar, to make the Industrial Revolution. They've done really nothing except be, and they should just be regarded from now on, from this very moment, with utter grace. Just, you know, wow, these are the most innocent people in the world.
It sounds like I heard a kernel of optimism, though, in what you said.
Oh, well, what else can there be but optimism? Even at the darkest moment, you know, what else can there be but optimism? Because at some point you think the people who are racist will just get tired of it. I mean, we who are black can't get tired of being ourselves. We just are. We're black. We don't know what to do about it.
It's all about trying to figure out
Yes.
who we are, isn't it?
Who you are, yes. And the freedom you might find in that, you know, constant search for, the mystery of who you are, that no law can define, no law can confer any grandness or lessness on you, who you are. I think that's worth thinking about and worth exploring. And it's not only an internal question, because the external world helps define who you are. And so all of those things I like to examine, I like to look at and question and find no answer. I think more than anything, the question must be asked, and there isn't an answer. Sometimes the answer is the question. Not to sound too Buddhist and too 1960s or something, though I do love hippies. I live in Vermont.
Thank you.
You are
so
very
much.
welcome. Thank you for
taking
having
time
me.
to talk with us. I hope you'll come back.
You must ask me back. This is great fun. Thank you.
You've been listening to author Jamaica Kincaid. Our conversation was taped at the 2016 Sun Valley Writers Conference. Our thanks to the organizers of that event for allowing us to talk to some of their insightful speakers. For more information, please check out the Dialogue website. Just go to idahoptv.org and click on Dialogue. For Dialogue, I'm Marcia Franklin. Thanks for tuning in.
Presentation of Dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore and Bettis family legacy of building the great state of Idaho. By the Friends of Idaho Public Television and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.